PopCast, a crowd-sponsored yo-yo show. Huge shout out to John Anderson, Taka from Spin Gear, and Dr. Lucky. I am here on Oahu, Hawaii, on a chocolate tasting journey. The whole point of this Hawaii visit was we were there for a chocolate tour. We were going to be checking out several cacao farms and then also checking out some local chocolate makers. The event was put on by Dandelion Chocolate, who is a San Francisco-based company, but they work with chocolatiers all over the world, and they're trying to help foster one of the few places in the US that you can actually grow cacao. It's pretty much a lost art that they are trying to reintroduce there. Nowhere else in the US has this ability. Hawaii has had a big part of the yo-yo boom that happened in the 90s. A gentleman named Alan Nagao started a company called Team High Performance Kites. He started a yo-yo club. He went to Japan and kind of spread the word of yo-yoing and then brought that over to the US. So Hawaii was the epicenter of the giant yo-yo boom that got me into yo-yoing in the late 90s. So my first time in Hawaii was for a THP yo-yo camp. This was years after the boom that happened here on Hawaii. And it was up on a shore. There was like 20 or 30 kids that were all yo-yoers. And I was asked to teach them how to yo-yo. And this is years after the yo-yo boom. But I was like the big celebrity that got into the yo-yoing and came here and showed them some of my yo-yo tricks. It was a great trip. I got to hang out with the yo-yoers, teach yo-yo classes. And then they took me to Sandy Beach, which is right behind me. It was my first time swimming in the beach. My friend Joseph Harris brought me there. He was a young kid. He didn't know maybe it wasn't the right spot to take a beginner, like someone who's never swam in the ocean. It turns out Sandy Beach is famous for being one of the most dangerous beaches on the island, if not in the world. That's because it's great for body surfing, but the waves crash right on the shore. So if you get hit by a really strong wave, you're tumbling, it's just pushing you into the sand and sometimes some rock. So that was quite an experience. It was actually pretty easy at first. I never swam in waves before. I was like, okay, this is cool. I kind of body surfed, caught some. You'd be pushed right up onto the beach, and sometimes you get a little scraped up, but it wasn't that bad. But as I was kind of swimming, I remember seeing the normal kind of high waves, and then in the background behind those high waves, you could see even higher waves. And if you're like down here, at the low point, and there's a wave and you see another wave even higher in the background, it's like twice as tall. So all the other surfers, all the other body surfers, they swam into the water. That's what you do. You kind of go into the ocean a little bit. The water, if you just kind of dive into a wave and go out a little deeper into the water where it's not breaking, it's way mellower than obviously where the water is breaking. Instead of diving deeper into the ocean, which seems like a stupid idea to a newbie, what I did is I tried to get back on the shore, and that's right where those waves were crashing. And the waves hit me, kind of dragged me onto my back, and then another wave hit me and pulled me. And I remember the force of the waves pressing me against the sand. I was underwater, being held down. I couldn't move because of the pressure of water, but I remember the water would come just above my face. I could see air, and then it would fill back up again, and then just come down, and I couldn't breathe. It was just right above my mouth. Finally, I made it up onto the shore, totally beat up. I felt like I had a heart attack or something. I was completely wrecked, and people were just laughing.
Let's take 1 second to meet our next demonstrator.
My name is Jennifer Baybrook, and I am the 1998 World Yo-Yo Champion.
Today I'm talking to Jennifer Baybrook, a national and world yo-yo champion. She's toured the world as a pro for Team High Performance, performed on stage with the Smothers Brothers, which blows my mind, and was recently inducted into the National Yo-Yo Hall of Fame. Congrats, Jen. I'm super happy to have you on the show. How are things going today?
Thank you. Things are awesome. I'm happy to be here. I always love sharing some of my stories. So I'm glad you gave me a call and invited me on the show.
You were there before the boom. You were part of the reason we got a boom. So let's just start off with you. How did you get into yo-yoing? How old were you at the time?
I was actually 6. So 6 years old. This is back in 1987, not to date myself, but it's been interesting because, obviously I was there during one of the biggest booms in history, but I also was taught by demonstrators that grew up in the 50s and 60s, and they were demonstrators back then. And so I was able to, hear their stories about being a demonstrator, being a kid and growing up with it. And, they influenced me a lot over the years. And just to be a part of the different mini booms since the 80s, has been pretty awesome. I think probably my most treasured time in the yo-yo scene was when I was a member of THP.
Your first gig was with Tommy Smothers.
Yeah, the Smothers Brothers. So they invited me to attend one of their live performances, and I believe it was in New Hampshire. So that was, I guess, my professional debut where they invited me up on stage and I could perform with the Yo-Yo Man.
Wow.
And I was only 8 years old. And, much to my embarrassment, my parents dressed me up like the Yo-Yo Man. I had my little yellow suspenders and, he was my idol in a way because I grew up watching him on TV and to see the Yo-Yo Man. And I do know that the different companies were pretty involved in promoting it and it was pretty popular. My first competition was the 1992 Worlds in Montreal, and I was only 12 at the time.
So what was your experience like being someone who yo-yoed out of love for yo-yoing for so long, and all of a sudden everyone else is catching up to this thing that you've been doing, and you see literally everywhere you go, you see someone yo-yoing. What's that like?
I think as a kid, I was always around adults who were doing the yo-yos and not around enough kids. So as a teenager, when that boom did hit and I did get to be a part of the team high performance, it was the first time I really got to be with other kids. And it was the time of my life. So, they became my friends and it really just became this wonderful creative outlet for me and, team environment that, I made friends all over the world, not just with my THP members in Hawaii. And, even to this day, I'm still connected with them on social media.
I'd like to hear a little bit about like 98 nationals and worlds where you won worlds that year. And just what it was like working with the people you were competing against.
Well, so I won the 97 nationals and 98 worlds to be clear, on that. And then what was it like? I think we had a lot of, as a team, I wasn't always out in Hawaii. I was because I lived in Vermont, so I wasn't always with them for training, but we did do a lot of training together and just practice for hours. And I think being around each other was very beneficial because I think it motivated all of us to keep trying and not to quit. And then at the same time, they were also your competitors, like Alex Garcia, even though he's my teammate, we were just head to head. We were key competitors for each other. So I think there was, plenty of moments where we made sure we had our private practice sessions where the other person wasn't seeing our secret trick or moves, our best moves. But overall, it was just, we all supported each other in the competition.
What are you working on now and how can people follow you online?
Well, Facebook and Instagram, you can find me there. I've been just trying to do some yo-yo shows here and there on the side. I'm trying to do some school programs. I am going to be hopefully launching some new stuff for myself and kind of getting more involved again. This is a decision I've kind of made recently. I will say I've had some health issues over the years that have been very challenging. Through those issues and those challenges that I've faced, it's always been the yo-yo community and people reaching out to me to support me who have reminded me what I'm capable of and just really just motivated me to push through those tough times that I had gone through. It's just this constant reminder of how great the yo-yo community is and how much it's been a part of my life and how much I want it to continue to be a part of my life. So yeah, I'm kind of jumping back into things again.
So the main part of this trip has been about eating chocolate. I've been yo-yoing in my spare time, but we did walk through a part of town called Kaka'ako, which is filled with a bunch of murals and illegal graffiti art. One of my favorite artists was this artist named Tonk, who was not one of the legal artists with a mural. I think he was definitely one of the graffiti kids keeping it real. And there was also this one piece that cracked me up. It was this beautiful mural, absolutely beautiful mural of a young woman holding a passion fruit, and she had some snakes around her neck. And I'm sure there's some beautiful story about her and her significance here, but it was just a very cool, strong pose of a woman with her passion fruit and her snakes. And then just a few feet down, that same mural, but in their style, which kind of looks like Linda from Bob's Burgers. It's an aspirational piece, you know, someone like being like, oh, I can do that. Let me work on my posture and hold my fruit, some snakes. I love that piece. Today I'm talking to Alex Garcia, a Hawaii State yo-yo champion and a two-time national champion. In 1996, Alex toured Japan with Dale Meyerberg, and they began the hyper yo-yo boom in Japan. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me on. Right on.
You said that you started yo-yoing in 95, I think, before yo-yo boom. Why don't you just tell everybody about how you started yo-yoing and what the yo-yo scene was like when you started?
Yeah, in 95, I saw one of my buddies right at the end of 6th grade with a Omega Brain, and was instantly fascinated by the yo-yo. I was like, wow, what the heck is all of that stuff in it? Where'd you get it? And he directed me over to High Performance Kites in Alamona Center. And the first trick that I ever saw someone do was from an employee named John Ornelas. And he was doing trapeze. And when I saw that, I got super excited and picked one up. And from there is basically how I started.
You know, I was watching your 98 freestyle and was noticing for 2A, you and the other players had much longer strings than what we use today. I want to hear about the yo-yo setup and why those strings were so long and what your favorite yo-yos of the day were.
Yeah, so back then the yo-yos needed to be modded. And so we would have to sand our spacers down. I think they were called hundreds, and then we had to sand them down to 90. Mm-hmm. Compared to now, the gaps in the yo-yos are, I would say, for the looping yo-yos could be a much narrower. And to compensate for where the loop is, you need to have either a longer string or shorter string. And back then the gaps were so narrow or so wide. And so you had to have them at the right length for them to loop correctly. Mm-hmm. And so that's why ours were so long. That's really the reason, is because we had to mod our own yo-yos.
So 95 is when you started. When did you start entering contests and stuff?
So in the same year, there was yo-yo classes that High Performance Kites started that I believe were weekly. And as a kid, I would just go to the store every day anyway. And then a few classes later, a couple months down the road, they had a state competition, which I entered and won. And the prize was to go to Japan with Dale Meyerberg and promote yo-yoing there. Dale and Nakamura would go around stores like Kittyland in Shibuya, Harajuku, and even to sports stores where nobody knew what yo-yoing was. It was really fun because it was guerrilla style, and we kind of just bounced all around and promoted it as best as we could. Dale taught me a lot about stage presence, and he also taught me how to do two-handed loops with Russell yo-yos, which were Coke yo-yos with the wooden axle and wax on the string and all of that stuff.
95, Hawaii, you're just doing a trick ladder. You get, as a prize, you get a trip to Japan and you get to perform. And then I'm assuming the first time you went to Japan, it was dead. And then was it the second time you went back and there was this massive boom?
The first time compared to the next trip and the next and the next and the next, it would start off with like no kids at all, no people at all. Then we would see a bunch of people come to the stage, and then all of a sudden we're not just performing at toy stores anymore in small stages and malls. We would be in conventions. And so we would go to the toy conventions in Japan where there's like 50,000 kids. We even had, me and Nakamura had our own bodyguards, and the rest of the guys, all the THP people. And we would have groups of teams that would tour around Japan and around the world. And it got so big. It's really cool to see how it went from really nothing all the way up to that huge boom.
Mm-hmm. How many years do you think you were performing before you set foot in front of 50,000 people?
I would say 98. So what is that? 5, 6, 7, so 3 years.
Yeah.
is when I got to see that incline just go from nothing to just ridiculousness.
Yes. What companies made this possible, this boom that brought me into
Yeah.
yo-yoing?
It was Bandai and HPK, High Performance Kite.
Which is not THP?
That High Performance Kite is the name of Allen's store. And then THP was Allen's old kite team's name, which then transferred over to THP in yo-yos.
How did Hawaii help spread the boom to the rest of the world?
I mean, it was all from Allen. He's the mastermind behind the marketing of the distribution and all of that stuff. But of course, without the players, without THP, the actual team, I don't think that would have happened. All of us kind of made that happen together. And the OGs are myself and Nakamura and Ian Hoshino, Ryan Kono, Ryan Lai, Jennifer Baybrook, Dennis McBride, Nalukai Okano. I don't know if you remember Nalu. A big part of the boom was because of us. It was because of THP.
Well, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate your time. Thanks again for that. 98 freestyle was just so much fun to watch.
Right off.
Wonderful freestyle, man. All right.
So I'm not doing any tutorials this episode, but what I am going to do is show you a trick I call falling mangoes, inspired by my trip here. Some parts are from previous tutorials, so I'll try to link some of those little elements in the description below. But for the most part, here's a pretty trick. I hope you enjoy it. And that's it for this episode of PopCast. Thanks for watching. And again, huge thanks to Alan Nagel for flying me out here 20 years ago to one of the most amazing trips I've ever had. It's really fun to be back and to stay in the same part of the island too. Thanks to my sponsors on Patreon, patreon.com/DocPop, where we do our monthly live streams, we do giveaways, and we do 10% off of yo-yos on the shop, drpopular.com. And just as a reminder, I've got some new colorways of DIYs and platypuses available. I don't have one with me, but I try to have matching yo-yos, so I have like the matching yellow and blue DIY, and I have a matching yellow and blue platypus. This is not that one, but I do have them, I swear. So check the site out for a bunch of restocks on DIYs and platypuses, and I might even be restocking the Populist soon. I was thinking about like an election edition Populist. We'll see. Well, thanks for watching. If you have any Hawaiian stories, drop them in the comments below. Mahalo.